right, now let's get into our discussion for tonight's program. Marie D. Jones is a best-selling author, screenwriter, researcher, radio show host, and public speaker. Her work includes 2013, End of Days or A New Beginning, Science, How New Discoveries in Quantum Physics and New Science May Explain the Existence of Paranormal Phenomena, and Destiny versus Choice. She is a co-host on the popular Dreamland radio show, interviewing luminaries in the fields of the paranormal, science, unknown anomalies, and alternative history. She also spent 15 years as a field investigator for MUFON in Los Angeles and San Diego, and currently serves as Director of Special Projects for the Arkansas Paranormal and Anomalous Studies team. Marie is a highly regarded and popular speaker on science, metaphysics, consciousness, and the paranormal, and has appeared at major conferences and events. She also lectured to local and regional meetup groups, networking organizations and libraries, bookstores, and author events. And again, her latest work, which we'll be talking about tonight, is This Book is from the Future, a journey through portals, relativity, wormholes, and other adventures in time travel, co-written with Larry Flaxman. And we bring her onto the program. Good evening, Marie. Thank you for joining us on the show. How are you?
I'm good. Good to talk to you guys.
It's great to talk with you, and it's always great to read one of your books because I go into it, feeling like myself, and I come out of it feeling so much smarter.
Oh, okay, good.
And then I forget it all.
Exactly. Yeah, so do I. Trust me, and I wrote it.
Well, that's not good because we need you to remember it tonight while you can share with our audience.
It's funny because Larry and I talk about how we've written so many books, and we sometimes forget which book was what and what we wrote in what book. And your brain just gets so full of stuff that we need to have like a dump, a brain dump.
Well, I mean, luckily, though, you do have the written word, and you're able to kind of chronicle all that research. And for the amount of books that you've written, both on your own and with Larry and even with your dad, you must be putting in so much research before you even put pen to paper or finger to keyboard in this case.
Yeah, and I would say that research is probably 75% of the work. Because once you have everything in place that you want to say, and you've got all your research, really writing is just filling in the blanks. Mm-hmm. And so you have to really like to research, which I do, but it's exhausting. And to do books back to back the way that I have been and with Larry, it can get really exhausting. But really, when you're writing nonfiction, that's probably the biggest chunk of what you spend your time doing.
How do you and Larry or yourself individually, how do you decide what topics you want to tackle next? I mean, do you have kind of a game plan, a board of numerous, professional sports teams have their draft board. Do you have like your draft board of topics?
Usually Larry and I are tossing, if we're working together, even if I'm working alone, there'll be some ideas that you're thinking about that you're tossing around, and ultimately you pitch it to your publisher, and they'll kind of, we have a lot of say in what we're going to write, but sometimes the publisher will say, well, this idea is a little more timely, or let's go with this one. In the case of two books, 3 that Larry and I did, 1111, The Time Prompt Phenomenon, The Deja Vu Enigma, and this time travel book, it really was our publisher, New Page Books, coming to us and saying, have you ever thought about writing about this? And it's just been wonderful because 1111 was the biggest book that Larry and I did together. So far, we're hoping the time travel book will be even bigger. And it's just really cool that, we have a publisher that we've worked with that has such great ideas that they're willing to offer us if we don't have something that we're really high on or real passionate on.
Well, what fascinates me about your work is that you always seem to have you're kind of right on the cusp of what the next big discussion point might be in the paranormal, and you're able to come out and simplify the explanation of it. But at the same time, these books could be used as textbooks in classrooms with the amount of information that you have in them. That's
something that, when I wrote Science, which was I call it my first big book, I had actually written another nonfiction book before that, but it was more just sort of fun social commentary. But with Science, what I learned is how important it is to give people their money's worth with a book, because especially now, buying books is not, it's considered a luxury. It's not something that people have to do. It's not something you need to survive. So I always felt like, and then when Larry and I started working together, we felt like we want to be able to write books where you could just buy one book and get enough from reading that one book. But if you wanted to continue doing your own research or looking into something, we're giving you, in our bibliography, more direction, or we're offering, in part of the research, we're telling you, here are some other books, some other names that you can go look into on your own. But we really want to just provide a real foundational education or just a real basic, place for people to start at and make them get their money's worth.
Well, now, before you started working on this book is from the future, what were your thoughts on time travel? I mean, did you think it was possible before you did the research?
It is so funny because I have done a complete about-face, but not in what you think. In terms of the scientific stuff, I kind of knew what was going on because, we were already fascinated by the subject. Who's not? I mean, really,
sure.
Who is not into this? So I was kind of aware of what was going on ahead of time, and I knew what the challenges and the paradoxes were, and I knew that there were all kinds of obstacles that had to be overcome scientifically. But I figured we are smart enough. I mean, this human species, we are so innovative and resourceful, and the way that technology and progress and knowledge is just, exploding, we'll figure it out. But what really shocked me, and Larry as well, which we were not expecting when we went into the book, was that our own personal feelings about time travel would change. And that came from looking at the ethics of time travel. Now, who would think of something like that? The ethical, moral aspect of whether or not we have a right to tamper with the past and even the future, knowing that if we do, it could alter the past and future of so many other people that we come in contact with. So as we were learning more about the sort of, the more quantum aspects of time, it really got different for us because, we would talk and say, I'd say, Larry, if you could go back in time, when would you go back? And he'd go back to the 80s because he's such an 80s freak. Or he'd go back to the building of the pyramids,
Some people like Moniz have never left.
I know, yeah, exactly. And, I thought, I would say when I would go back and I would do this and I would change that, because isn't that the first thing you think of? If you could go back in time, what would you change?
Sure, and some of us pick something, of our own lives, and some of us pick something on a grander scale. I mean, you hear so many people say, well, I'd go back and I'd, stop the Holocaust, or I'd go back and stop the Kennedy assassination. And but like you said, there's the ethical matters. You don't know what happens if you change what's already been.
And I'll tell you, this is what is so interesting. As we were writing the book, I had gotten a copy of Stephen King's novel 11/22/63, which is all about time travel.
A great book too. A real return to form for him too.
Yeah, totally. And he did so much research with a research partner into the time travel paradoxes and the ethics and morals of time travel that I almost felt like, why do I even need to write this book? And then my young son turned me on to this Family Guy episode where Stewie and Brian go back in time and they try to somehow stop 9/11 or whatever. And it was the same type of thing. It was about, if you go back and you try to fix the past, how you might actually be breaking the present and the future. And all of that really shifted the focus because we started the book out with the fascination of the pop culture, how it's just totally permeated every aspect of pop culture, from movies to TV to books to video games, you name it. And the cool science behind it. And we came out of the book thinking so much more about, do we have a right to do this even if we do achieve the technology one day?
Right. It's almost like it's along the lines of human cloning. Just because we can do it, does that mean that we should?
Exactly. And people will say, and here's what's really interesting.
Or have we already?
Oh, I'm sure we have, yeah.
Well,
but the thing about cloning is, it can do some good things medically. I'm sure it can help, provide organs and cure diseases, but it's the negative side of it because I always feel like we human beings have a hard time controlling ourselves. And seeing, we want to push it all the way to the edge of the envelope, and maybe we're not supposed to do that. Whereas if we could just control what we're doing with some of these real tenuous things, like time travel and cloning, we'd be okay. And I can just see with time travel, people who don't understand the paradoxes, who don't understand the ethics, just totally taking advantage of being able to go back and change their own past because they're selfish, narcissistic, they don't care about anybody else, and not realizing the damage that they could do to the other people that they've come in contact with, because we're all connected. So your timeline is connected to mine and vice versa. And, of course, there's ways around that. If there are such things as parallel universes, we can maybe escape some of that. But, yeah, that was really, really shocking. I was not expecting to come away with that.
I mean, normally, though, the only time ethics come into play is when you were talking about, like you said, the pop culture references, and time travel has become such a plot device that people no longer look at it as a scientific possibility or impossibility. They look at more of it as how to direct a storyline.
And you know what's funny, though? I mean, a lot of times if you look back on old science fiction short stories and novels, all the way back to the late 1700s through the 1800s, how they imagined the science of the future. It's almost like the science fiction of the past becomes the science fact of tomorrow. So it's really fascinating to see how some of these shows and some of these books and short stories sort of, they were a little precognitive in their imagining and envisioning the future. But I do think it's become very acceptable for people to think, oh, yeah, time travel, we can do it, we're going to be able to do it, and there's no problems. They don't realize that there are problems. And people will say, well, what if I just want to go back and observe? Like, what if I want to go back and observe the birth of Christ and the life of Christ to see if it's anything like, Christianity tells us? But the problem is, we know from quantum physics that just the act of observation and measurement will alter the behavior of particles. It could change the outcome of what it is you're observing. So even in that aspect, even if you don't want to go back and change a thing, just by doing like It's a Wonderful Life or A Christmas Carol, where you just go back and look at what it would be like if you were never born, you could be changing something and tampering with things that you don't really want to be. So it does give you pause. But you know what? We'd probably all still do it, wouldn't we?
I would.
Yeah. So, I mean, if it all came down to it, I'd probably be like, oh, God, all right, yeah.
Mind if I ask you a couple of questions about actual events, quote-unquote, dealing with time travel and time slips?
Ask what you want. I'll try to answer them as
all right. Are you familiar with the Rendlesham Forest incident?
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
Betty Randall's, or some, I forgot what the name of the book was. But,
well, I'm actually part of the book that was written.
Were you?
Left at Eastgate by Peter Robbins and
okay.
Larry Warren.
Yeah.
But are you familiar with Jim Pendleton's case in that particular story?
I'm trying to think of...
He's the person that actually physically touched the craft.
Okay.
And he received information, and he's gone off on a, let's call it a mission about that these were actually time travelers.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, go look up a lot of Jim Pendleton's stuff, and he's actually gotten a lot of information that you may find extremely intriguing.
Yeah, I remember reading how he sort of, when he touched it, kind of felt zapped or just real disoriented. And
correct.
And wasn't he seeing like diagrams or
correct? There were raised
right. Okay.
There were raised pictograms, and these pictograms searches have also found themselves around the world.
Right.
And this also leads to other time travel things. Now, I'm also interested in your opinion of the John Titor case.
That's such a tough one because my first instinct is, yeah, you're right. I'm a real skeptic. I was not around when he was posting and doing everything, so for me, learning about it was after the fact.
Well, for those who might not be familiar with the John Titor story, maybe you could give us a little bit of a background.
Yeah, well, apparently in the early 2000s, I think it started in 2000, 2001.
Actually, it was before that. Was in the 90s, actually.
In the 90s, yeah, back when there were bulletin boards instead of, Facebook and stuff. It's funny, you think back on how ancient those things were.
The pre-Al Gore days.
Right, there you go. This person starts posting that he was a time traveler from, I think this is the year 2036, and for some strange reason, he had been sent back here to retrieve a very archaic, like IBM computer system.
Parts to one, yes.
There you go, parts. You probably know more than I do. But anyway,
He may be John Titor. I'm not really sure.
yeah.
I told you,
Hey,
keep that
you know,
quiet.
wouldn't that be cool if we can identify? Well, anyway, so he was supposedly a soldier, and he was doing some kind of special time travel project, quote unquote, and started posting predictions and like almost prophetic predictions about things that would come in the future over the next, I don't know, 10, 15 years or so, and posting information about this time machine that he had, which he kept quite strangely in the rear of, I think it was a Chevy Corvette.
Yep.
And he actually put up instruction manuals and pictures. We have a couple in the book. And so anyway, this went on for a while. He was, I believe he called in and talked to Art Bell for a number of times on Coast to Coast. Nobody could figure out who he was. He engaged people for a while. He had a lot of followers. And then I believe he just sort of vanished. And there were some attempts to identify him. There were some people that thought that there were people that were associated with him that were the real John Titor. But I do believe that to this day nobody knows who it was, what happened to him. It was, to me, it was, you know, one of the big urban legends of time travel. I mean, anybody can go on a computer bulletin board or call Coast to Coast and pretend to be something.
Well, some of his photographs that he produced were quite interesting.
They were.
The bending of light and several other
right, and I believe
items.
there was a gentleman who patented or tried to patent the manual, some of the information in the manual, the device itself.
Correct.
But, yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, you know, we've got other time travel conspiracies. We've got a general who claimed that he's passed away now, but he claimed that he was
Exxon?
Hoover with Roswell, that he saw the entities, that he believed them to be time travelers from the future, that they could manipulate consciousness. This is a very high-ranking military official that claimed to have access to the Roswell crash, materials and the entities.
This isn't Exxon, General Exxon?
He may have been one of them, but this is George Hoover.
Okay. Hoover's the one that shared his information with Bill Burns, right?
Right, and his son, who, and again, we don't have proof of any of this, but, that's a little interesting. And I've heard other people talk about the Roswell case in terms of time travel as well. I think that's really interesting that in the field of ufology, you're hearing that a lot more. That if these are advanced civilizations that have figured out how to get from, there to here, might they be time travelers?
Well, that's something I'd like to definitely discuss a bit more coming up in the second hour, because we've only got a few minutes here before we have to take a break for the news, Marie. But coming back, I want to talk about some of these other stories of time travel over the years, and I want to get into a lot of the theory behind some of it, because it's not as out there as some people might think.
Right.
What we talk about as theories that could make time travel possible could also be applied to the other work that we do in the paranormal. And I think some of these same theories could apply to, like you said, UFOs, and also could apply to ghosts and all kinds of psi phenomena. So we'll talk about all that coming up in the second hour after the news break. But before we let you go here for the first hour, we just want to give our condolences to the entire Fate magazine family. This week, the great David Godwin passed away, the amazing Godwin, as he was known for many years. He was born in January of 1939. He actually died this past October. But they just went public with the information. He had earned a Bachelor of Journalism degree from the University of Texas at Austin, and he was a past master of the Masonic Lodge No. 3 in St. Paul, and a longtime student of the Kabbalah, occult lore, and magic. He also authored a number of books, including Godwin's Kabbalistic Encyclopedia, The Truth About Kabbalah, Light and Extension, and How to Choose Your Own Tarot, as well as editing Fate for over a decade as a managing editor and writing a few books for them as well. So our condolences again go out to the entire Fate magazine family, especially to his best friend and editor-in-chief Phyllis Galdi, and to everyone over there. So we lost a great champion of the paranormal and a great chronicler of the paranormal as well. So Godspeed to you, the amazing Godwin. All right, we are coming up on the news break, and we will be back again, as I said, to talk more with Marie D. Jones about her book. This book is from the future, and actually, this book is from the future, because I'm holding it in my hand right here. So this particular one in my hand is from the future. And we will discuss that more in depth during the next hour. If you want to pick up a copy of the book, you can do so by going to Marie's website, mariedjones.com, and it's also linked up on SpookySouthCoast.com as well. So if you go to our website, click on the picture of Marie that pops up in the slideshow, it'll take you to her page there. You can purchase the book right on the site as well. And Marie, you've got all your books up on your website as well. How many titles altogether now?
Larry and I actually just signed a new book deal, so this for me will be number 11, and for Larry and I will be, number 6.
And we were talking earlier about how much time we spend sitting in chairs here doing the program. I can only imagine what it must be like for you. You must be standing up and like jogging in place sometimes while typing.
Yeah, I write real erratically. I mean, I'm not one of those write every day people, so I make sure I move around. Otherwise, you'll never get me out of this chair.
And sooner or later, there's got to be a book of your many Facebook postings as well.
Yes, I hear people are collecting them.
I got to say, for writing what's probably how many thousand words in one of these books would you say? 65, 70,000?
75, 80, yeah.
So you're probably writing an equal amount on social media
I know,
while you're
and
writing
you know
the
what?
book.
That's my way of blowing off steam when I'm doing all this research. Otherwise, I'd probably jump off a cliff. So.
All right. Well, don't do that between now
won't.
and the next hour, because we'll be back in just a few minutes following the news, where we will talk more about time travel, again with Marie D. Jones. If you want to check out our website, mariedjones.com, also linked up on SpookySouthCoast.com. And if you want to call in at any point with questions, you can do so by calling in at 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. You can also email us, spookycrew@SpookySouthCoast.com, or jump in the chat room on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com. That's the best way, because now I can see on the monitor that we brought into the studio. So we'll be able to ask your questions on the air as well. So we'll be right back with more here on Spooky South Coast. We're going to time travel right now. Really deep into the discussion on time travel with tonight's guest, Marie D. Jones. She's the co-author, along with Larry Flaxman, of This Book is from the Future, A Journey Through Portals, Relativity, Wormholes, and Other Adventures in Time Travel. And if you have any questions during the course of the discussion, feel free to call in with them. 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. And for those of you listening on podcast, it almost is like time travel, because you're going back to Saturday night and you missed your chance to call in with questions. That's why you got to listen live Saturday nights from 10 to midnight Eastern Time, and join in the chat room on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com. You're missing so much more of the program by waiting. But then again, a lot of people are using us to help while away some of the hours of their week, so we appreciate that as well. Over 2 million downloads now for the program.
Not too shabby.
And like a million of those have come in the last 5 to 6 weeks. So it just shows that either all of a sudden we got really good, or for the first 5 years we were absolutely terrible. One of the two. Either way, we'll take it. So we're coming up on anniversary number 7 this January. So lucky 7. And who knows? Will we get the 7-year itch, or will we get the 7-year syndication deal? Let's hope so. All right, let's get back into the discussion with our guest, Marie D. Jones. And Marie, we were talking in the first hour about the process of writing the book and your own beliefs in time travel going into it. But with all the different potential theories behind the possibility of time travel, it's hard to read this book and not come out thinking that not only is it possible, but that someday we will figure it out.
Yeah, and Michio Kaku, who is a brilliant theoretical physicist and one of my idols, he has a great quote where he says basically what time travel comes down to is, the technology. We can do it, we just need the technology, and I'm totally paraphrasing. Every time we come up with a new theory, we get a little bit closer to something that might actually work. And there's so many different challenges and obstacles that we have to deal with, overcoming faster than light speed. We haven't found anything that can do that, especially if something has mass. It would require just an infinite amount of energy to get that object to move at a faster than light speed. We've come close with certain particles. If tachyons exist, there's a lot of theory about the possibility that they could exceed light speed. There was an experiment, I think it was last year, a couple of years ago. My time frame is totally off.
No pun intended.
I know, really. Where neutrinos, which are particles without mass, They actually thought that they had breached light speed, and of course it turned out that there were all kinds of problems and issues with some of the equipment and technology and the GPS tracking and whatnot, and so they decided that no, indeed they had not done that. But the idea is that there may be an unknown particle as of yet that could breach light speed, and we might be able to extrapolate that information to an actual physical object. It's just, I mean, come on, television 500 years ago,
right?
Cell phones, yeah, it's going to happen. The things that we have to overcome, again, are the paradoxes, breaching light speed, finding a way to do it, and, literally manipulating the space-time continuum. And there's been so many different theories about things like, loops and closed timelines, time-like curves where you have like a loop where something that starts off in the past will go into the future and then return to the past. But there's always something wrong or something missing from each theory. The big one now, there are two big ones actually, is trying to find a type of wormhole that would be stable enough and we could keep the throat of it open with some type of exotic matter that we don't yet know exists, that we could actually get something, whether it's information or a particle or an object or even light itself, because right now light can't get through a wormhole, where we could get it, through the opening and out the other side, into the black hole, out the white hole. That's a theory that is really popular in the scientific community as well as obviously throughout science fiction. And the other one is the idea of the multiverse or parallel universes, where there are also alternate timelines, so that if we wanted to get around the paradoxes, and when I say paradoxes, I'll give the example of the most common, and that is the matricide or the grandfather paradox, where if you were to go back to the past and shoot your grandfather, you wouldn't exist. That would pretty much end your existence. So how could you exist to be able to go back to the past and shoot your grandfather? It's like a loop. But one of the ways around that is the idea that there is another universe that branches off where you do exist, or where you don't exactly kill your grandfather, or this, that, and the other thing. And that gets into the whole multiverse theory, which we were talking about earlier, can also be applied possibly to paranormal phenomenon, trying to understand where some of this stuff comes from. So it seems like every time we come up with a great theory or a great idea, there's always one little thing that stops it from being workable, but we're getting closer. But brilliant minds working on this stuff,
Sure. And of course, one of the most brilliant minds to ever tackle the subject of time travel was Dr. Samuel Beckett, who created all my hopes and dreams about time travel with Quantum Leap. But
there you go. And how about Doctor Who? I mean, come on. All we need is that TARDIS,
But with Quantum Leap, though, the idea on that show is that when somebody did travel back in time and something was changed, then the timeline skewed off into a different direction.
Right,
same thing with like Back to the Future. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, would that be just an alternate timeline, or would that be one of these alternate universes?
It could, you got to figure if it's an alternate universe, it's going to have its own timeline. Why do we assume that it would operate on the same timeline as this one? I would think each universe has its own laws of physics, has its own timeline. And what I love about shows like that is a lot of times they have scientific consultants that work on those shows, that provide the research and, here's what's going on today, here's some of the theories that are out there. So some of those shows you may laugh at, and yet they probably are giving you a good education of some of the real discussions and real theories that are going on out there. Now, a blue police box, maybe that's a little far-fetched, the whole TARDIS thing, or the DeLorean. But some of these shows, certainly, they're trying to add a little bit of science, just like the short stories of, H.G. Wells and Charles Dickens. And they're really tackling in their own way the science of their time and what theoretically might be possible in the future. And that's why I love science fiction. I honestly believe that a lot of science fiction becomes science fact.
No, because it's the science fiction that's inspiring the scientists of the future.
Yeah. It's
or of the present, too.
Right, because what you've got is you've got writers who probably have read all the research because they're fascinated by it. But they're allowed to imagine beyond the confines and the limitations and the obstacles. They're allowed to imagine and go way out there where a lot of scientists don't go in their work because they're sticking to what they can prove. So, yeah, I mean, they're paving the way for ideas. I mean, look at Star Trek. All of the physics of Star Trek, and it's a fantastic book, by the way, things that teleportation and cloaking. I mean, we have achieved cloaking of 2- and 3-dimensional objects. I love the idea that you can read something that is fictional and get a glimpse into what might be coming down the road.
Now, I work in analytical chemistry, and there's it was a game that was actually introduced, and it was called Fold It. And it was set out into the public, and what it allowed people to do was fold proteins.
Oh, wow.
People didn't understand really what it was. It was just a game that had a set of parameters. And within 3 weeks, they solved the issue or the problem of how AIDS transmutes through.
God.
So they're doing the same thing now with RNA. Now, who's to say if they can't take the same technology, the bits and pieces that they have, and put it towards time travel and put it out into the population and let them work the problem?
Absolutely. And I think that's happening. There's probably people in their basements right now that are not serial killers. They're just doing their own research and developing their own time machines. And there's, of course, been a lot of conspiracies and urban legends about people that are doing that and that the government is already doing it. But, yeah, I mean, I think that's what's so great about shows like Quantum Leap and movies like Looper and, Back to the Future and what have you. Jumpers. Was it called Jumpers or Leapers? Wasn't there one? Leapers.
Quantum Leap.
Right. But there was another one, too. It was like a group of young people.
Sliders.
Thank you. I knew it was one of those words. But these, they're putting ideas in. I mean, most people will watch that stuff from a purely entertainment point of view, but there are people that will watch it and they will be inspired or something will come to them. They're very inventive. They're totally into time travel. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I think that the presence of time travel material out there it's only a matter of time before somebody's going to say, "Hey, I did it! I overcame the paradoxes, and this is how." So it may not come from the research community. It may come from some maverick, brilliant science brain in his or her basement.
That's how some of the best inventions come about. Now,
absolutely.
One of the devices that you can say we got from Star Trek, a lot of people point to the communicators as being the precursor of today's cell phone, and cell phones recently created a little bit of a buzz in the time travel community when this still surfaced from the Charlie Chaplin film, and it looked like a person maybe from the future talking on a cell phone.
Oh my gosh, that's trippy. Yeah, and there's a little video, too, that you can watch of that during the filming of the circus. It was 1928, where there is what looks like a woman, although, a lot of people think it's a man dressed as a woman. Could be just a cast extra or something, walking through the scene. To tell you the truth, I'm more fascinated by the striped horse pretending to be a zebra. But anyway, there's this person, for anybody who hasn't seen it, you can Google Charlie Chaplin time travel, and believe me, you'll get it. Walking through this scene, holding something up to her ear that looks like a phone, like a cell phone, and looks like the person is talking into it. So, of course, everybody, oh my gosh, back then they didn't have cell phones, and they didn't even have, walkie-talkies or anything like that. The funny thing is, though, just with a little bit of research, we were able to find there was a company called Siemens that did hearing aids. And they had a really big clunky one that came out back in, I think, 1906 or 1908. So you got to figure, 10 or so years later, they probably had streamlined it a bit. So, some people are thinking, well, maybe she's adjusting her hearing aid or talking in her hearing aid, except the problem is you don't talk into a hearing aid.
Right.
You listen to somebody who's talking to you.
And what does Siemens make now?
What do they make now?
Cell phones.
Do they really? Oh, I didn't read that. How funny.
Disinformation.
So maybe she was testing their first prototype.
Maybe.
But it's fascinating. I mean, there's other pictures that we found. There's one guy on a bridge opening. it's in the 40s, I think, where he looks like he's completely out of place because he's dressed in modern clothing.
There are several photographs I'm aware of like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's always people that are able to somehow debunk them or attempt.
No, I know the photographs you're talking about. It's had some sort of bridge opening. Like
let me see. I'm going to find.
He's wearing a type of
T-shirt and like a leather jacket,
that had not been invented yet.
Right.
That particular style had not been invented.
Modern dude.
His modern glasses,
totally hip. Hipster sunglasses on.
A hipster in the 40s.
This is coming from a guy who looks out of place in every photograph he's ever in my co-host Matt Moniz. But
he may have been like a fashion designer who was testing out a new look. But you know what's fascinating to me is that you see something like that and your first thought is, as a time traveler, I would not think that. But, hey, who knows?
I can tell you that the whole Charlie Chaplin thing, as much as it fascinated me, I figured out really quick that it couldn't really be a time traveler talking on a cell phone for one simple reason. I can't get a cell phone signal in my house.
I know.
So how did this person get one in the 1920s?
There were no cell towers. I mean, that must have been really amazing. They were picking it up from another planet. Who knows? But, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. And these things go viral, and then it's like you can't shut them up.
Right.
You cannot put them down, you know?
I got a question for you. You familiar with the New York cowboy case?
Is that the... Well, I don't know about...
There's a couple of them, actually.
Yeah, because I know there's one where a guy showed up just out on the street. He almost got hit by a taxi or something. And he
get hit. Yeah.
He did get hit, yeah. But the cowboy one, no. I don't think I've heard that one.
Well, there's a couple of them. One of them involved a guy that was supposed to be hung. And he disappeared and showed up literally 60, 70 years later. And not in the same spot, roughly, but he hadn't aged a day. I'm trying to remember the name of the exact case. And photographs and the people and other witnesses that were alive verified, this is the man.
Yeah. There's been a lot of examples like that. And I would never, ever say that they're BS because I wasn't there. I don't know. My first instinct with anything like that is always, it's somebody's misinterpreting something, or it's an urban legend that somehow got exploded, went viral. But how do we know? I mean, if time travel... A lot of theoretical physicists will tell you that if there are advanced civilizations, their technology will look like magic to us. Okay? That's how far ahead they will be. So why would we not possibly think that some of them are showing up here, whether they're time traveling or just coming from another part of the multiverse, and they're going to be out of time. They're going to be look like magic to us. Maybe John Titor was one of these people. So I never want to completely discount any of these stories, even though my first gut instinct is always kind of like with the paranormal. It's always, okay, I believe you, but now you got to prove it to me. So I think it's really going to come down to somebody coming forward with just such, undeniable proof that they are from the future or the past or what have you. And I don't know how you would do that. The
argument that we always hear, though, is if time travel was possible, somebody would have gone and stopped the Civil War. Somebody would have gone and stopped, the Holocaust. But isn't it possible that time travelers could have caused those things, that they could have played a hand in that regard? Or maybe, like with the whole incident of the whole idea of the paradoxes, they can't interfere with them.
Exactly. And, Stephen Hawking has his own paradox that he calls the chronology protection conjecture, something like that, where he believes that we're not meant to time travel, that there are laws built into the universe, into the cosmos, laws of physics that will prevent time travel from ever happening because it could unravel, the very fabric of existence. And Larry and I call it the Lady Gaga paradox. Maybe we're just born this way. We're not going to be able to physically travel through time. Now, I believe we're doing it mentally in many different ways. And that was a really fun part of the book to write, how we already are mentally time traveling. But we're such a physically oriented species that we want to be able to do it with our bodies. That's like the ultimate proof to us. But maybe Stephen Hawking is right, and that there is something built into the fabric of the universe that absolutely will not allow for a time machine to ever be built.
Well, what about Montauk Project?
Yeah, that was a big one, too. And again, here's a conspiracy, quote-unquote, involving people that claim they were part of a time travel research program under DARPA. And I believe it was back in the 70s. I think it went on for, maybe about 20 years. And it involved everything from children that were being trained as chrononauts or time travel astronauts, being sent back into the past, into the future, again using wormholes and manipulation of the electromagnetic field. There are other projects. I think one was called Stargate, where they claim that there are both natural and man-made wormholes or stargates all over the planet that can be utilized for time travel, and that the government knows about them, and some of them are naturally formed in the environment. Others have been manufactured. I don't know. Somebody told me that Area 51, the whole UFO thing, is just a big cover for them doing time travel research. Now, how can I prove that to be right or wrong unless I'm actually there? But,
Well, I think that the idea of it is so... It's fascinating to people on a scientific level, but it's also fascinating to people on a romantic storytelling level too.
Sure.
I mean, because we do live such limited lives, we'd like to be able to see what happens before and what happens after,
right?
Just our brief little flicker of existence.
Well, people say, well, why would you write this book? Why is time travel so important to people? It's important to people because it's one of the few things that we cannot control.
Mm-hmm.
We can control our spatial existence to some degree. We can move about at will to the left, the right, here, there. I can go to New York, I can go to Japan, I can go to the moon. Although there are some limitations. I can't quite go to Pluto yet, but it's just a matter of time. So spatially...
Well, it's no longer a planet.
Yeah, it is. Come on.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I know. But spatially we can move about at will, pretty much. We can't do that with time, and it really upsets us. We can't control it. And the other thing is that we feel that we don't have enough of it. We're not utilizing time as best we can. I think that drives a lot of the obsession with going back to the past and fixing things and changing things. So I think time travel has a huge sociological aspect to it that is completely linked to human behavior and what drives us. The only other thing that we can't control is death. We're going to die, We can't control time, and it really makes us angry.
But you also, you mentioned the fact that time is something that we can't control, and the question is, though, is there a need to control? I mean, time is kind of a construct of the human mind.
Absolutely.
More than anything. And you spent a great deal of the book discussing Einstein and his theories into it, and he kind of felt the same way.
Absolutely. It's illusion. And when we started getting into the more mental and consciousness-related aspects of time and how the brain is structured to perceive linear time, but outside of the brain there's no such thing, that's when you start to realize that we need to step away from this physical drive to control time because we might already be doing it. I mean, let's look at things, things like precognitive dreams and deja vu and all kinds of paranormal experiences, missing time, time slips, time shifts, time distortion, time anomalies, people who have visions, and even prophecy to an extent, remote viewing.
You left out one subject.
Which one?
Out-of-time artifacts.
Oh, a porting? The objects moving through time, out-of-time artifacts, or out-of-time people?
Yeah.
There's so much of that, and that we were so fascinated with that part of it because it really, you can go into an altered state of consciousness and you can time travel. You can see into the future. I mean, people do that all the time. And I've had visions of something not so good happening, and weeks later it happens. I mean, I think that happens to quite a few people. Precognitive dreams.
Oh, I thought you were talking about going to Taco Bell.
Yeah, well, you can pretty much predict the future that if you go to Taco Bell, you're going to be sick the next day.
Moniz can guarantee it every Sunday morning because he goes after the show. But, I mean, like you're saying, though, time is something that is so subjective. I mean, Moniz and I could be sitting here doing the show, and at the end of the program, I could be like, wow, that flew by fast, and he could say, gee, that really dragged.
Absolutely.
Not that he would say that about you, Marie, but...
Yeah, you'd be like, oh, man, did that drag.
It is so subjective. Each person experiences time differently, and even though we try to measure it and try to have this linear measurement of it, it's so subjective.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, please, people, let's stop focusing so much on our inability to maybe do something with the physical body when really it's the mind and consciousness that can rise beyond the limitations of the physical and do all of this. And a perfect example of that is Larry works in law enforcement, and he talked to me about times when he was in a situation where somebody's got a gun to your head, or there's just a very dangerous situation that he and his partner have to go into. And this happens on the battlefield in war, where time literally slows to a crawl. And there's actually a physical reason for that happening. It's to allow the brain a little bit of extra time to think of a survival method. If you're in a really dangerous situation and time seems to slow down, that you're in slow motion, that's actually a survival mechanism. Now, on the other hand, if you're involved in something you really love to do, whether it's fishing or golfing or writing or whatever, time will go by really fast, and you'll look up at the clock and say, oh my God, 6 hours have passed. I thought only 20 minutes had gone by. So you're right, it's totally subjective. It's totally relative to what we're doing. It's not linear except within the confines of our physicality. And that's what I think we need to overcome, is maybe physically we may not be able to do it, although I think that's coming too, But how are we already doing it beyond the physical self?
But it's so hard because we've already been hardwired before we're even born that we're constantly trying to beat the clock. I mean, when the first second you're born, you're already starting to die.
Racing. I know. And if you think about it, it makes sense. In order to have a meaningful life, things have to happen in a particular order. You have to be able to put events in order to give them meaning. And also the whole idea of causality, and that effect will always follow cause. Well, you're born, eventually you're going to, the effect is you're going to die. So there is this arrow of time that we are trapped by physically, at least as of now. Who knows? We may evolve in a million years into entities that live beyond time. But right now, this is what we're dealing with. And I think a lot of the frustration comes from people feeling like they're given a certain amount of time. They're not using it the best they can. So when they get to the end of their lives, or even before then, they want to go back and change things. I think that's why time travel is so popular. They're not living in the present. They're worried about the past, stressing over the future. So then they reach a point where it's, oh, my God, I wish I could go back and do all those things I regretted not doing, or not do the things I regretted doing. And that's why a lot of the wise spiritual and religious sages and teachers always talk about focusing on the now, because they know that beyond the physical confines of the body, there is no such thing as past, present, and future. There is only now, the present moment. It's getting a little metaphysical there, but I really think that that's where...
That was Zen.
Yeah. That's where this drive to overcome time and control it comes from, our inability to do that.
Well, we are talking with Marie D. Jones. The co-author of this book is From the Future, along with Larry Flaxman. And if you want to call in with any thoughts or questions, the numbers are 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. You can email them to us, spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com, or you can jump into the chat room on Spooky TV at spookysouthcoast.com. It's right there under the live show heading at the top of the page. Marie, we did talk quite a bit about how, time travel can be used as a plot device in a number of stories. And I got to ask you, what's your favorite time travel movie/book?
Oh, God. I love a lot of science fiction, but I got to tell you, my favorite, because they're just, the Christmas movies. My favorite book is Stephen King's. I think he blew it out of the water with his examination of the paradoxes. And for anybody who hasn't read it, you got to read it. It's about somebody who was asked to go back in time and prevent the assassination of JFK. But what comes out of all of that is just absolutely mind-blowing. And like I said, I learned about time travel ethics from that book and from Ron Mallett, who is a theoretical physicist who has written a book. His father passed away when he was young, and they were very close, and he made it his life's mission to develop a method of time travel to go back and help his father. So those are things that really drive me. But in terms of like fictional stories, for me the most fun are things like It's a Wonderful Life and Christmas Carol. And the reason being is I think a lot of us, again, our obsession with time comes from wondering if we've spent our time well. And I love that those movies show you how you could think your life is, no big deal, and you really haven't touched a lot of people or inspired a lot of people. And yet if you were to go back and look at what everyone around you would be like had you not been born, that's fascinating to me. That idea of showing somebody how precious their time was and, just sort of overcoming that feeling like, well, I haven't used my life, the time that I've been given, very well. I love those.
Well, we have a couple questions that have popped up in the chat room over the course of the night. And one question is how familiar are you with the Nazi experiments into time travel back in the 1940s?
The only ones that I know of, I'm thinking of afterwards, Operation Paperclip, when we brought a lot of them over to help out here. Aren't we wonderful? I don't know too much about what went on before World War II, if that's what they're talking about. But I would imagine, because they were very much into the most cutting-edge research, that they were probably on par with what Nikola Tesla was doing, an awful lot of research into time travel and the manipulation of the electromagnetic field. So I don't know. I know post-World War II, but I don't know what happened before that.
And then a story that I think you covered in the book, the gentleman who was fixing the sink and ran into himself.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, my God, I got to go back and find what his name was. Yeah, that's kind of creepy. That's another one you can look up on the Internet. A guy who was doing his own plumbing, and he went through his sink, and didn't he meet his father?
No, he met himself in the future.
He met himself in the future. Okay, because there was another one where, okay. Yeah, I don't know.
In the video, they show both of them holding up their arm with the same tattoo. Now, I've got a friend that's
his brother,
What's interesting is I got a friend that runs a tattoo parlor, and I asked him about this. Like, well, if this person is aged over a certain amount of years, the ink would have faded to this, and there would have been distortion in the tattoo.
Wrinkles and like age spots and stuff. Yeah. I don't know why people do that, but hey, who knows? Maybe he had really good skin when he was older.
A lot of it, though, is fun. I mean, it's fun to think about the idea of time travel, and we look at something like the Back to the Future films. I feel about those films like some people feel about Star Wars. I love Star Wars too, but I just feel that way about them. And I've had endless debates with even my own brother for hours about the alternate timelines and how many DeLoreans there could have been at any one given time,
exactly,
and things like that. And we like that because it's something that it challenges our mind, but in a way where we can't really be wrong because it's not real.
You know what's funny about the Back to the Future movie, is the first one specifically, where they talk about, you are my density. This whole idea of destiny really plays strongly into whether or not we can ever overcome the arrow of time. Because if there is any kind of predestination to the universe, if there's any kind of plan or blueprint that's at work, and, we get into things here like intelligent design and what have you, but if there is any kind of foundation, a blueprint, that would have to be followed. So time travel would not work within that framework, okay? If there is destiny, you're on a trajectory from the past to the future. That's the destiny that you're moving towards. So to tamper with time travel, you would literally be tampering with the destiny of the universe. And I love how that movie brought that up in such a really fun way, the silly idea of your mom falling in love with you and that whole thing. But, you know, destiny plays into this free will. If we can have the free will to go back and change the past, then does that mean that there is no destiny? There is no predeterminism? There's no blueprint to the universe? It's just sort of a crapshoot? So it brings in all this other stuff that I don't know if a lot of people like to think about. But it's fascinating to me.
Well,
it's such a deep subject.
As you mentioned before, and as King wrote in the book, you know, the past is obdurate. So
yeah, absolutely.
You know what I find fascinating? A lot of the time slip photographs that you see are always of the past, never of the future. And technology being an arbitrary piece of equipment that has no consciousness or memory really of its own.
Right.
How can it be subject?
At least yet.
Well, you understand what I'm saying.
In the future, that might change.
True. But
Skynet.
Here's a good example. I saw a photograph that was taken from, it looks like high altitude. I think it may even been part of a satellite imagery of New York Harbor. And in one of the cases, on one of the, in one of the ports, there's the perfect image of a World War II vessel docked at a berth that is not at, or hadn't been at for over 50-something years.
Right.
How does a satellite out in space catch an image of something that happened 50 years ago?
That ship must have just snuck into our timeline and our universe for 5 seconds, long enough for the satellite to... I mean, I really love the theory of the multiverse because it allows for all that kind of stuff to happen.
The overlay.
And prove it.
Yeah.
But if, you know... And I think, and again, we were talking earlier about this possibly applying to the paranormal, the idea of cryptids and these creatures that appear and then disappear. They come out of nowhere and they sort of vanish into nothingness. And I really think that there are both environmental and physiological things that occur at just the right time to allow somebody to glimpse something that is in an alternate universe or timeline. And maybe that satellite captured, you know, that little bit of crosstalk between universes. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, however long enough it took to snap that picture. And then, boom, it was gone. And you know, it's a wonderful explanation for everything from ghosts to UFOs to cryptids to time anomalies and visions and what have you. It's just that we're getting some kind of crosstalk or bleed through from other levels of reality.
And if that's the case, then that would be something that we could probably control a lot easier than wormholes.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I think that maybe there are these land-based wormholes that are these locations where the environmental effects are just right for these things to happen. I mean, the Bermuda Triangle and the Devil's Triangle and the Great Lakes, you know, these...
Bridgewater Triangle.
Right, controversial areas. I mean, people have debunked them and then said, no, there's something to it. But it very well could be that there are locations on the planet where it is possible for some type of wormhole, maybe not the kind that we're envisioning out in the cosmos, but some type of tunnel from our reality to another reality actually exists. And Larry and I, the next book we're writing is called The Grid, and we're really going to take a look at this idea that there are environmental and physiological effects and influences that if they line up, if they align correctly, allow for this kind of bleed through to occur. And could this be what accounts for all of the things that we consider to be anomalous, that are so erratic and so inconsistent? Well, is this just bleed through from other realities? What has to be in place for that to happen? So wormholes could be all over the planet. They're just not the way that we envision them from science fiction movies and TV shows.
Well, I mean, and the more that we explore the idea of these multiple universes and these little windows of opportunity to see into them, we can almost kind of figure out how to do that on a more consistent basis. Yeah. You know, if we can find these spots, let's just say, for example, you know, a haunted location is a place where you can glimpse from one universe into another.
Exactly.
Then we should be able to not necessarily
recreate it or make it happen,
but at least to be able to kind of follow it in a scientific manner and document what goes on.
Right, but I think there's another aspect too, and I think that explains why you and I could be standing next to each other, and you can see something and I won't, or you can have an experience of another reality and I won't. And I think that's because there's things that are going on within our physiology. Whether it involves brain chemicals or hormones or your blood type or what have you, that work with the environment, EM fields, seismic activity, whatever, that the two have to work in perfect alignment for something to be experienced. And I really think that is probably the best explanation I've been able to come up with as to why you can have a number of people in a specific location, and some of them have amazing experiences and others don't. I don't think it's because some of them are nuts or some of them are making it up. I honestly think that there are influences, both interior and exterior, that are going on that are allowing certain people to get glimpses into other realities. And I think that's why, some people are better at remote viewing, or they may be very good at precognitive dreams or what have you, and then others don't. Some people are really good with hunches. Their gut instinct is right on the mark. They're very intuitive, or maybe they have a lot of deja vu, or they've had past life recall, and the guy next to them has never had any such thing.
I don't think it's facetious to say, they're operating on a different wavelength.
Resonance, frequency, all that stuff, absolutely. Vibrational. I mean, if you can align the frequencies that you're operating at, or your brain, with what's going on in the environment, yeah, sure. I mean, resonance is a huge part of what Larry and I research, and what we think might be the mechanism behind opening one reality into the other.
Harmonic resonance.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we all know, though, that if there is going to be time travel in the future, we are going to figure out this conundrum and how to do it. There's got to be one simple motivating factor, and it's not going to be humanitarian in nature. Exactly. Right, money. I mean, what kind of profiteering can be had from this? It's unimaginable.
Yeah, I mean, who's this guy? Is it Richard Branson?
Mm-hmm.
Who's behind privatizing space tourism or something? Yep. I can't. Yeah, I mean, there'd be theme parks, like Disneyland, where you go and you pick a time frame that you want to go back to, and you get on the ride and you go plug in the.
There was a movie that did that, and if I recall correctly, it didn't work out too well.
Yeah. I would hope, That's true, though. People are going to want to make a buck. They're going to want to sensationalize it. They're going to want to, just turn it into a circus. And that's why, physicists like Ron Mallett, at the end of his book, even though his quest, his drive, his dream is to figure out a way to travel through time, his book ends with a warning that we need to be ethical about this because we could be really messing things up.
Well, the minute that it is achieved, the minute that it's possible, then there's the need for regulation. And as soon as there's a need for regulation, there's the possibility of corruption. So It's probably better off that we can't do it. But, I like the idea more of the total recall aspect of it, where, you can create the false memories. You can create kind of the experience of time traveling. And I remember back in the 90s when, virtual reality was a thing.
I was just going to say, yeah, you do it that way.
And it never really came to fruition, but virtual reality would have been perfect for those who want to time travel, because it would be a way that you could experience the past or maybe even somebody's vision of the future without being able to...
Yeah.
And without being able to change the rest of the world within your experience.
Exactly. Yeah, I really do think that hopefully if there is something that will stop humans from doing this, it is there because of our inability to ever do anything and do it right without somebody turning it into something negative. So maybe Stephen Hawking was right, that we just... The laws will not allow it. Who knows? Maybe it's been done before in our distant past. So the universe sort of adjusted itself to say, oh, no, not again.
And, maybe it's not people that are meant to time travel anyway. Maybe it's just our thoughts and our energies that are made to time travel. Maybe that is an explanation for why we have electronic voice phenomena or apparitions.
Exactly.
Or
I believe that, and I think that, again, this goes back to that age-old debate of whether mind and brain are the same, separating mind consciousness from our physicality. We're so focused on what the physical can do that we forget there's this whole other part of us that can do anything. And that maybe that type of research is what we should be focusing on. And maybe the body will evolve and catch up later.
Now, you had mentioned that yourself and Larry are working on a new project called The Grid. What can you tell us about that?
The whole title, we actually are with a new publisher. We're with Hampton Roads, Hierophant, and the title is The Grid, Exploring the Hidden Infrastructure of Reality. And it sounds big, but what we wanted to do is through the Larry and I have been working together for over 5 years, and we just keep coming around to the same things. We keep coming around to, again, the idea of the multiverse and how it applies to the paranormal, and how it applies to how we view our own reality, and maybe the illusion of us only having one reality. So we use the grid as a sort of visual symbol that maybe the truth is there are many intersecting levels of reality to our existence, and there are connectors between those levels. And there are triggers and mechanisms by which you can travel up and down or across a connector to get from one level to the next. We want to lay out as much as we can about what we think might be happening environmentally and physiologically that allow all that to happen.
Wow.
So we use the grid because we just sort of came up with this, there's grid theory. I know there are other people working on similar things, but we just really came up with this visual because we didn't like the idea of a field theory. It's two-dimensional. We wanted something that people could visualize in their heads. We'll look at a grid, a three-dimensional grid, with all the little connecting lines that go up and down, side to side, and imagine you are on one level of that in your normal day-to-day existence. But when you go to bed at night and you dream or you have some kind of deja vu or you see a ghost, you may be going up and down some of those levels. And how does that happen? What might be happening to allow you to do that? Why are some people better at it than others?
Well, it sounds like as much as you've tackled big topics in the past and brought them down to the average reader's speed, it seems like this is going to be
I hope so.
an even bigger task.
We're a little intimidated, but yeah. And it's going to be sort of an introduction to all of this. Hopefully there'll be some follow-up books to where we can really, really, really get into the real basics behind what might be happening in the human body. So we'll touch on a lot of that in this first book.
Well, this book that you're talking about tonight this book is from the future, and it's available on SpookySouthCoast.com and on Amazon.com and wherever books are sold, and I highly recommend that you pick it up because it is going to get you thinking about the possibility of time travel without blowing your brain up, trying to wrap your head around it. And before we let you go, Maria, I have to get your opinion on something that I got in my Google News alert today about the paranormal. And you and I have talked in the past about a television program that we were working on, and we had kind of a vision for a story. Well, this new show that's going to be coming out on the Lifetime Network is called Paranormal Housewives.
Oh.
And it's being executive produced by Julia Roberts, of all people.
Oh, you're kidding.
And it's not one of these Real Housewives of the Paranormal. It's a drama. It's a scripted show.
Oh, you're kidding.
But it's based on real life paranormal investigators who are also housewives, and it just seems like are we surprised that it took this long?
No, it'll be paranormal garbage collectors next. That is hilarious. I had not heard about that.
Zaffis already has a show.
I would like to see,
oh my gosh.
Instead of taking the middle-aged housewives of the paranormal and putting them on TV, I'd like to see like a Golden Girls of the paranormal.
Oh, that would be awesome. Like the Betty Whites of the paranormal out there just kicking butt and taking names. Oh my God.
That's going to be the next thing, I think, is elderly paranormal investigators, those who are already close to touching the other side.
Well, yeah, because they've got the most motivation for trying to figure out what's going on.
Exactly. And then you can have that
they know
episode.
more people on the other side.
They
exactly.
direct direct friends and relatives, and then you can have that episode where Gus passes away, and then he comes back and talks to the group and all that kind of stuff. But when I saw that, I was like, how perfect that we're having Marie on tonight, that we can.
Too hilarious.
And
we couldn't get our idea off the ground, huh?
Well, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. I've been asked to retool it, and if you're still on board, it's a little bit different of a take, but.
Okay, well, we'll talk. But that Paranormal Housewives.
And I just can't believe Julia Roberts is throwing her hat into the paranormal right now.
She must see the value in anything paranormal makes money. So she's probably thinking, hey, this is a good investment here.
Either that, or she's just given up and she decided to go to the network where Lindsay Lohan's career went to die.
Exactly, and they're like, sorry, Julia, we're only going to talk to you if you've got something paranormal to give us. So just off the cuff, she said, Paranormal Housewives.
Right, I think Julia Roberts and the Lifetime Network are paranormal alone.
Oh, my God, that is hilarious. I'm going to have to look into that. That's funny.
So I don't know. I think you should pay attention and make sure if there's any characters that are kind of based on you, that you have the lawyers and the legal team ready.
I am going to get my team ready, yeah. Are there any, single moms?
I'm not sure. They haven't really given a lot of plot details yet. But
yeah, well... They probably don't
How
have
much
it yet.
plot detail can you really have?
I know.
I'm guessing a lot of the ghosts will look like Lyle Lovett.
And they're going to have, Mary Kay parties and, while they talk about ghosts. I have to watch that. I have to at least watch the first episode.
I mean, I refuse to ever watch anything on Lifetime other than Golden Girls reruns, but I think you and I might have to check it out.
Yeah, and it's only a matter of time before they merge the two, the Golden Girls and the Paranormal. You know it's coming.
Well, I mean, with the exception of Betty White, I think they all are on the other side. So,
yeah.
And I just can't wait till I get an EVP of a voice saying, "It's me, Stan."
Exactly.
All right. That about does it for tonight's show. We want to thank our guest from tonight, Marie D. Jones. This book is from the future, and this book should be on your bookshelf or in your hands or in your Kindle or your e-reader device. It's available in all those formats. You can go to mariedjones.com. And it's also linked up on SpookySouthCoast.com as well. Thanks again, Marie, for joining us and keep us up to date on the grid. And hopefully you can come back and talk about that somewhere down the line.
I would love to. And thank you so much, guys, for having me on.
Oh, great to hear from you. And tell Larry next time he's got to join in, too.
He will. Definitely for the grid. Yeah, definitely. We'll get him on.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. That is Marie D. Jones. And don't just check out This Book is from the Future. Check out all of her books because you will find them to be fascinating reads. And even though they're very complex topics, they're nothing that you can't handle when you're taking Marie's account of them. And it just, you feel smarter being able to walk around with this book. And people are like, oh, what's that about, time travel? And you can start explaining to them some of the theories about why it might be possible. And you didn't know anything about it before you started. So. Definitely check that out. All right, we'll be back next week when we will talk more about the paranormal. Don't forget, you can join us on Spooky Crossroads Wednesday night at 9 o'clock. I'm not sure if we're doing a show this week because of the holiday, but normally Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock. And, of course, Spirit Connections with Tiffany Rice and Stephanie Burke airs Tuesday nights at 7. And you can get the audio feeds now from the Spooky Alternative feed on iTunes and on the SpookySouthCoast.com website. And, of course, the flagship show, always available on podcast form from iTunes or wherever podcasts are found. So, and be sure to check out the video archives as well on YouTube. And keep sending us those emails, spookycrew at SpookySouthCoast.com. Let us know where you're from, how you found us, and what you like about the show or don't like. And come and visit our website, too, because we could use the web hits. I'd love for our web hits to reflect our downloads. Yeah. That would be really helpful. So if you can do all that, we appreciate it. But, all right, we'll see you next week. Stay spooktacular.